It's a Wednesday afternoon, not in New York, but in Houston, Texas, at hmsnetradio.org. My name is Ray Hill, and I'm in the studios at Houston Media Source, from which I do Ray on the Radio every Wednesday afternoon at 2 p.m. until 3 p.m. I really appreciate all of you folks who have tuned in because we've done some effort to promote this show. It's right in the middle of a couple of news cycles here in Houston, and we sometimes don't get that current. I flash back to history, and we talk about media theory and all kinds of things we talk about on this show. But this is a very timely show dealing with things that are in the news in the Houston media right now and ongoing. Again, my name is Ray Hill. The name of the show is Ray on the Radio, and we're going to spend the next hour talking with each other. The telephone will be open. I ask you to wait a few minutes till after I kickstart the subject before you start calling in, but you're welcome to call in. And if you got a pencil handy, you can write the number down. In the United States dialing system, now this is internet radio, so I know I've got listeners all over the world, in Turkey and Jakarta and other strange places that in Mexico that listen to the show and particularly interested in this topic. The number here, once you get in the United States, you folks calling from overseas know how to do that, but once you get into this continent, it is 713-222-0715, 713-222-0715. And if you're watching this on television, don't use those numbers because this is being taped for television, although it's being broadcast live on internet radio. The topic is the culture of mendacity that exists not only in the police department, but also in the district attorney's office and prosecutor's office, and indeed in the courtrooms of Harris County and to a large degree all over the country. I have discovered recently that there is a cottage industry of vendors, and they are a vendor to the city of Houston, which make an effort to teach police officers how to lie in various cases, usually narcotics cases and vice cases. It's a lot easier to teach them to tell a kind of a pot boiler lie. In other words, tell the same story in every case that includes all of the elements to sustain a conviction. It is easier to do that than to tell the truth of what actually happened in the investigation and arrest of the suspect. One becomes a defendant, one goes to court, and they hear a story that they don't have a hint where that comes from. It is entirely fabricated by a police officer who has been trained by a vendor to tell that lie. In future radio programs and television programs, we're going to plumb that out, and maybe we can sucker somebody who provides those kind of services to go on the air with us, and we can ask them to tell how much money they're making. They make a lot of money by selling a service to various police agencies around the state to teach police officers to professionally tell lies under oath. Now, it's no secret that cops lie. Cops lie in all kinds of cases. I mean, I don't know why a police officer would get excited about a stop sign ticket so that he stands and tells an absolute untruth. Well, the car did not completely stop. It was a boulevard rolling stop kind of thing, which didn't endanger anybody. So I gave him a ticket, and I want to make sure that they get convicted because I don't like the color of their car or the kind of wheels they have on their SUV or what the color of skin is. I mean, it's not unusual for police officers to get excited about getting convictions and to tell lies under oath. It is also not unusual to call the conclusion that in most cases, narcotics officers lie under oath. It's a lot easier to come up with a fabricated excuse to make a street stop. Now, here's how it usually manifests. The national system of surveillance figures out that somebody is, because they're eavesdropping on emails and telephone conversations, and they figure out that somebody's going to deliver a baggie of dope somewhere else. And lo and behold, they get pulled over for what the officer thought was a burned out tail light. It was, well, it looked burned out to me, even though it was just a little dirt on the lens. And so I stopped it. Well, normally narcotics officers don't do that, but when narcotics officers get information from the federal surveillance system that this is going to hop, they will actually make a traffic stop for a tail light, and then they just happen to have the dog with them at the time, and they go through the car and they find the baggie of dope and maybe some other stuff. And so the case, what appears to be an innocent traffic stop, surprise, discovery, is actually plotted and planned over some period of time so that they knew where the car was going to be, and they sent out that particular officer rather than rely on the guys on the motorcycle from doing the stop for the tail light. That happens all the time. But when you get in court, the officers are so proficient about lying how they accidentally stopped this car while in their plain clothes wearing their narcotics jacket for a burned out tail light. I can assure you that in the normal operating business of an officer in plain clothes wearing his arrest jacket, they don't stop cars for tail lights. That's not what they do in their day's work. They only do that when they have advance information from either a snitch or the surveillance system that a bag of dope is being transferred to another part of town. And you got to understand, in narcotics case, there is no crime until the arrest is made. No. Without some kind of information about who's transporting and when they're transporting and all of that, there is no crime until the arrest is made. So they don't have a lot of losing cases. And sometimes the officers go search, and they just can't find enough dope to make a case, so they reach in their pocket and augment what they do find so that there is a case. That's not unusual. They save a little from the last arrest to plant on somebody else. And that happens far more frequently with people of color than it does people of white skin. I know about that. I've always been white, but I've never quite been white enough to take care of any white skin. Anyway, I'm a troublemaker, and they're suspicious of me all the time anyway. But in vice situations, cops lie in every case. They do. Sometimes I insulted a good friend of mine who was a criminal defense lawyer representing people in the adult bookstore business at one time. He's now a judge, and I offended him deeply, deeply, because I said, your defendants were being lied on all the time, and you didn't have the courage to stand up for them and challenge the courts and challenge the police. It's a lot easier to go along. You make a lot more money that way. If you don't expose the cops for lying, then they will make more arrests. And if you get paid according to when your clients need representation, the judge, as a criminal defense lawyer, made a lot more money by keeping his mouth shut about the obvious lies of the officers. I know, I worked with him. I knew that. And before I came into this studio, I was before Harris County criminal defense lawyers, talking about these cases, and mostly it was warmly received. The judge was deeply offended, although I didn't finger him in such a way that anyone besides me and him knew what I was talking about. I at least have the courtesy of not trying to embarrass him as friends. So here, Thursday, 2 weeks ago, out at Memorial Park, 22 people were arrested. Now, if you've been following the story in the media, you know that John Silva of HPD Public Information Department and I were wrangling over the actual number. John Silva got mad because I announced that 22 people had been arrested, and he said that's not true. Ray Hill is exaggerating and sensationalizing. Only 7 people got arrested, and that is true if you consider those arrests from one location in the park. But there were 2 operations going on in the park. At one location, 7 people were arrested, and they were all charged with indecent exposure. Most of them were not guilty. 2 of them were arrested before they even got out of their car. And then several people were arrested that exposed nothing but the police officers who were wearing Speedos and some of them in like regular shorts. Their legs are not so pretty. But those with pretty legs wore Speedos and gay pride T-shirts. And there was one T-shirt described to me, it looked like it had a chrome penis on the back of it. I haven't quite got a visual on that, but I can kind of imagine what that looked like. And they were out there showing their legs and trying to seduce somebody into getting arrested. And they arrested 7 at one location. But at the same time, in another part of the park, on the jogging circle, officers were near some bushes, and they were beckoning people off the jogging trail. Psst, psst, come over here, come over here, come over here. Well, you don't know what that's about if you're jogging, and some lackluster people would follow them, and if you walked into the bushes with them, you were getting handcuffs and you were going to jail. They had 3 Ford 250 paddy wagon vans involved in this operation. You don't need 3 Ford 250. These are big vans. You don't need 3 big vans to transport 7 people anywhere. You have room left in one van to separate them, but they had 2 vans, and one of the observers that was not arrested but watched from some distance saw them load 4 people from somewhere else in the park other than the picnic circle where the public exposure people were being arrested. From another part of the park, saw them drive up there and unload 4 of them into the vans. So the 3 vans left with, there's still more room in there than they need for 22 people, but they're pretty packed. And they would leave people for hours in those vans without the engine running, no air conditioning. It's basically like leaving your puppy in a locked car outside the store while you go in and do shopping. If you have any question about this at any point in the game, you can give me a call. This is Ray Hill on Ray on the Radio here at HMS Net's radio studios at Houston Media Source on East Houston. The telephone number here is 713-222-0715. Now, what happened to all these defendants? Well, they all get carried downtown. They all get charged. The chatter in one of the vans carrying people that were arrested, not at the picnic circle, but at the other location, the officers were talking in the front of the van saying they were going to go downtown and charge them with soliciting to have homosexual sex. The problem with that is that there's no law in the state of Texas against having homosexual sex. So they got downtown, and the booking sergeant said, you understand that Section 2106, the Homosexual Conduct Act in Texas, was declared unconstitutional in 2003. And even before it was declared unconstitutional, it never had a soliciting element to the statute. In other words, the only way you could violate Section 2106 was not by asking somebody to join you. You could do that with complete impunity for as long as you wanted to. You don't violate Section 2106 of the Penal Code. It's since been declared unconstitutional. But even when it was law, you haven't done any violation until somebody penetrates somebody else. That's the nature of that law. So since they're going to lie about this anyway, they decided to charge them with soliciting prostitution, which is illegal. And so here we have frequently married men with wives and children being arrested for soliciting prostitution from an undercover police officer wearing Speedos and some kind of fancy gay suggestive T-shirt on the jogging path at Memorial Park on a Thursday afternoon. Think about that. Think about that. But it really doesn't make any difference what they charge them with, because the officers are going to lie on the offense reports, and the officers are going to lie under oath on the testimony stand. Again, there is, remember, a cottage industry which the city of Houston pays to have someone come in and provide a seminar on how to tell an effective lie in that kind of case. Now, I know from my own experience that cops lie. Here in December of 2012, I was on Richmond Avenue having a bottle of water. I haven't had an alcoholic drink since January the 4th, 1959. So I'm stone sober, and I'm sitting around talking to friends, drinking water, and somebody comes in and says the cops are all over Treasures. And so I turn and ask a friend of mine to drive me over there, and he says, why don't you take your own car? And I said, I don't want a car stranded in that parking lot. I know I'm going to get arrested if I get there. I know. I had told the police chief, Chief McClellan, in his office about a week before that, oh, by the way, your Vice Captain Smith is a bully. He tried bullying me over the telephone. I don't respond well to that sort of thing. And, of course, the chief laughed, and I said, tell his friends that he said he doesn't have any friends. He's the same guy toward other police officers he is to citizens. He's a bully, so he doesn't have any friends. But he's captain of the Vice Squad. Captain of the Vice Squad. He runs that department. That's what he told me. And he said he didn't answer to any superiors. He didn't answer to any assistant chiefs or any police chiefs. Vice Squad is his department to run. No questions asked of anybody else. That's what he told me. Conversation. I said, well, in that case, he's setting the pace for the rest of the department, and all I got to do is catch him. Catch him. And I'm going to get arrested. And that is going to change the paradigm. And he said, well, that ain't going to work, Raymond. You've been arrested by our officers too often. We're up to you. We know what you do. And our officers are trained not to mess with you. Don't worry about it. It ain't going to happen. The day I got arrested, I called then Assistant Chief Trevino, his Victor's brother, who was an assistant chief over Special Crimes Division. And I called him and I told him they're out there. They've hit 5 clubs in 4 days. All I got to do is find them. And when I find them, I'm going to get arrested, and that's going to change the paradigm. Chief Trevino, who has since retired from HPD, laughed and said, ain't going to happen. Chief told you it wasn't going to happen. I was in the room when the chief told you it wasn't going to happen. I said, you don't understand. You don't know your officers as well as I do. So I went to Treasures, got somebody to drive me, and I said, park where you can see that door so you can watch as I come out. I walk in, have a few words with the doorman, who's this enormous guy, and talked to the doorman, turned, and I talked to an officer just briefly, only long enough to refer him to him by a noun, casting dispersions on his relationship with his mother. He started shoving me from the front. 2 other officers came up behind him, was handcuffed, and perp walked out the door. I went in with my hands in my pocket, and I only removed them when they went to put the handcuffs on. I was in the building 46 seconds from crippling over the threshold to get in to being perp walked out the same threshold out. 46 seconds total time in the building. Came in with my hands in my pocket and left with them in handcuffs. Now, when the officers got back to the police station, they were told, we've told you not to mess with Ray Hill, and there you are. And they said they had to do it because it was a safety issue. And they filled out their offense reports, and In their offense reports, I was in the building more than 20 minutes. I had run through the metal detectors screaming and waving my arms about wildly, and I had gone off into the club, and they had to come find me and bring me back to the front door to handcuff me. And I hit several customers and several employees and at least 3 officers, and I was carried to jail. And according to their offense reports, I was charged with aggravated assault on a police officer, 3 counts that could easily have resulted in my going to prison for more than 10 years. When the offense reports came over the wires to the intake division of Harris County District Attorney's Office, my attorney Stan Snyder was there talking to the intake manager. And he said, "I represent Mr. Hill. May I have those offense reports?" And they were given him. Subsequent to that, a bunch of detectives called me out of my cell and carried me in a hall, and there I got to refer to them by more of those nouns, casting dispersions on their relationship to my mother's, and told them, "Are you crazy? I mean, I know my rights." I said, "You go get Stan Snyder and Paul Nugent, and you set them in my lap, and we can talk all day, but without presence of legal counsel, I've got nothing to say with you." And I called them those names frequently, and one of them said, "Oh, Raymond, see, we know all one another." All cops call me Raymond because that's what my criminal record are in, so they call me Raymond. He said, "Oh, Raymond, we just thought you'd tell us what happened." I said, "I don't have to tell you anything. The whole thing was videotaped." It got strangely silent in that hallway at 61 Reasoner Street where they had called me out of my cell. It was like, what a shock. Well, wait a minute. I'm in the lobby of an adult topless club in the city of Houston where money is changing hands at the front door, and they couldn't figure out there was a security camera in that area? You know, cops are not as smart as they used to be. Because, I mean, even civilians can figure out if there's money changing hands in the front hall of a club that there would be a security camera there, if for no other reason, for the guy that owns the place to keep his employees from stealing from him. And I never got out of range of that camera. And it has a date time stamp that counts down. That's how I know I was in the building, exactly 46 seconds. It's on the video. Countdown. So that changed the paradigm. I wound up being charged with interrupting a government official, a Class A misdemeanor, the way they filed it. It's actually a Class B misdemeanor, but they aggravated it because that was Ray Hill up to a Class A misdemeanor. But they didn't have anybody they could put on the stand because I had the videotape, and they had the sworn affidavits. All you got to do is play the tape and read the affidavit. And the cop committed perjury. So the lawyers representing the cops, who I also know, had advised them it would not be a good idea for you to take the stand in any trial in this matter. You can't take the stand in the criminal trial because all you got to do is say, "I swear in," and you can be found a defendant in a perjury case. And you can't, for the same reason, testify in a civil case. So there's no officers to put on the stand in the criminal case and no officers to put on the stand in the civil case. And the civil case is being drafted now. As soon as Jerry Bernberg gets back from overseas, he'll finish up the work and off we go to civil court. I don't go to jail for BS for free. You can call in and join this conversation. I'm going to let you change the conversation today, but I'll let you join the conversation. The number is 713-222-0715. 713-222-0715. You're listening to Ray on the Radio here on hmsnetradio.org. In the beautiful studios, see how beautiful they are? There's a camera, and you can see that what splendor I do this radio show in. You can call 713-222-0715 and join the conversation. You're welcome to do that. you have any questions, if you have anything to add, I'll listen to a few comments, but I'm not going to let you change the subject today because this is an important subject. And since it's being videotaped, it will ultimately be broadcast on hmstv.org or on Channel 17 Comcast channel system. It's one of the choices at Channel 99 on UVerse, and your smaller cable systems in Houston also carry this. Houston Media Source is your way to access being the media, and that's what I'm doing here, as I am doing radio, which is on the internet and will ultimately, because it's on the internet, be heard all over the world. 713-222-0715. Now, when you call in, and when you call in, see that the phone works? When you call in, I don't have anybody to screen the calls. So here's a little warning. There are 7 words in the English language that you can't say, including that one that I talked about, casting aspersions on people's relationship with their mothers. But you can think of at least 2 dozen words that shouldn't be said. Don't say any of them. And there is no delay. So if you said one of them, I'd have to cut you off immediately and apologize to my audience for your invasion of their ears. So the number here is 713-222-0715. Glad to have you aboard. You're welcome to give a call in if you choose. And we're looking forward to, I'm here every Wednesday afternoon from 2 until 3 o'clock. We're about halfway through the show. And I've talked about the sting operations in Memorial Park. And I've talked about my own getting arrested. And there will be a civil case over that. I'm trying to get my lawyers to style it instead of the usual Raymond Wayne Hill versus City of Houston, which the others have been styled. There have been 4 of them. I won them all. I'm trying to get them to style this one Raymond Wayne Hill versus Anise Parker et al., because I know the city is going to have to appeal all of the decisions in the cases that we win, which is not difficult at this time because we've pretty much proven the principle that one's arrest for calling an officer that particular noun is a constitutional thing to do. As a matter of fact, in Hill versus Houston, the Supreme Court case, you can look it up. It's 107 Supreme Court Reporter, 2502, parentheses 1987, the year the decision came down. You can look that up, and in that case, Justice Brennan is obviously having a good time writing the majority opinion. And in one quick passage, he says, raising a single finger at a passing squad car does not justify the search of your trunk. So now you know how Hill versus Houston is used in every courthouse in this country every day, usually because of illegal searches of trunks because of a finger. So I don't know. And other people don't think of using the Supreme Court as a strategy to protect and expand individual rights. Usually Supreme Court cases happen in people's lives like lightning. When I got arrested for interfering with Officer Kelly and his partner at the corner of Whitney and Westheimer in 1982 on Valentine's Day night, when I got arrested for that, I had been looking for an excuse to get arrested for violating 3411 of the municipal code. I know you don't sit around reading municipal codes, but I do. And when I read in 3411 that it shall be unlawful to interrupt a police officer in his duties by any word or utterance, my mind immediately thought, what says the First Amendment about that? So from the time I was arrested to the time I got a 8-1 decision from the 9-member Supreme Court, I knew that the ordinance was unconstitutional. All I had to do was get it there. And I got back to Houston and watched the city council eat that ordinance. To give you some idea of the history of that ordinance, it passed in 1898. It passed the Houston City Council on the same day another ordinance passed, making it illegal to bring unemployed Negroes into the city of Houston. Well, that ordinance didn't last as long as 3411. And 3411 lasted as long as it did because no one had the courage to challenge it. Scores of people were arrested for it. In my federal trial, the late Channel 2 camera tech, Jack Long, is one of my AA buddies, testified about getting arrested for operating the camera for the Jack Cato, who later became county treasurer. He was a news reporter for Channel 2. And there's a film of Jack Cato holding Jack Long's hand, trying to prevent the cops from dragging Jack Long back to the paddy wagon. Amazing history. The people in Texas history are so wonderful and so colorful, and I've been so fortunate to know so many of them. But at any rate, there's another case I want to talk about. I got a call just last week. Young male voice, a great deal of stress in his voice. It's like something that had just happened. But it had actually happened more than 90 days before he called me. And he left a message which revealed quite a saga. He's a student at Houston Community College downtown campus. And some 90 days plus before, he was in the middle of finals at that campus, and came lunchtime. He caught a 42 bus, which drives right through that campus and drives over to right behind Disco Kroger, and then it turns around and goes back. If you go to school at HCC campus, you can catch that bus and go over into Montrose. And he went over into Montrose, and he went to Jack in the Box there at the corner of Lovett and Montrose. And he had a sandwich and something to drink and fries. Then he walked back to the bus stop. And when he got there, a SUV with a good-looking man drove up and said, "Can I give you a ride?" And he thought, well, I can ride back to HCC in comfort and not have to wait on this bus. And he got in the SUV. And they hadn't gone a block before the driver of the SUV said something about oral sex and $20. It's not entirely sure who was providing the oral and who was providing the rest of the act. But there was $20 involved, and he turned him down flat. He said, "No, I don't have sex for money. I'm not interested in having sex for money." But the guy was good looking. He left open other possibilities, and that having not worked, and the guy made another offer, how about $15? So he thought he'd lower the price of the offer and sweeten the deal. And the guy said, "No, I'm not interested." And about that time, the young man noticed there was a tape recorder, or what looked like a tape recorder, on the dashboard, and he said, "Maybe you better let me out. I need to go back because I've got finals to take this afternoon, and I don't have a lot of time for this anyway, and I'm not interested in the money." And the driver said, "Well, just a minute," and he drove into a parking lot where there was a bunch of squad cars. And at first, the young man thought, "Oh, I've got somebody to give me some relief from this crazy guy." And no, the cops were there for him. They drug him out and carried him off to jail. He was in jail for the next 90 days plus. Took him about a week to get to court and get a court-appointed attorney. You can get that if you're in jail. And his court-appointed attorney was Elisa Shapiro Strauss. And he was in Judge Carahan's County Criminal Court number 8. And he kept telling his attorney, "There is an audio tape that will prove my innocence." He wasn't offered a pretrial services bond, and his family didn't put up money to hire a bondsman to get him out. As a matter of fact, Just like anybody, if you get accused of a sexual offense, your mother doesn't think you're innocent. She may still love you, but she doesn't think you're innocent. That's the emotional load on a sexual offense. So he's in jail. So his lawyer comes in on the second appearance and says, I've got some good news for you. We're going to give you basically 20 days, but plead guilty, and you can go home today. And he said, I'm not guilty, and I'm not going to plead guilty. And she treated him like he had insulted her, and then so he went back to jail. Another 10 days passed, and she came in and said, you can get out of jail and go home today. All you've got to do is plead nolo contendere, and the judge will find you guilty, and you can go home today. And he said, I'm not guilty. And if you'll get that audio tape, it proves that I am not guilty. And at some point along the line, the audio tape was gotten. The DA got it from the cop, and the DA has it in their file, and a copy of it was given to his defense lawyer. And still it was, you can plead guilty or plead nolo contendere, and you can go home today, but we're not dismissing the case because of your priors, which dealt with a public intoxication case that dealt something with his fraternity experience. And he sat in jail. He, of course, had missed his finals, which happened the afternoon he was arrested. Where he is today and where he was yesterday and the day before, he's taking remedial courses at Houston Community College trying to make up so that the money he spent on tuition on those classes is not wasted. He gets credit for them. Not an easy thing to do, and it may not work, but he's trying. He's also suffering PTSD from the arrest and the treatment at the hands of the cops. They treated him roughly at the arrest, and he spent over 90 days in jail. At some point, Judge Carahan heard the tape and still did not dismiss the case. Did not dismiss the case. After 90 days, which is more time than he would have spent if he were guilty and pled guilty, more time than he would have spent in jail for that offense under normal circumstances. They just dismissed the case, and according to the defendant, his lawyer told him the judge ordered her to destroy the tape. She denied that in my conversation with him. When I called her about this case, I identified the case, and she said, there is no story there. And I told her, ma'am, I usually like to make those decisions for myself. I got a text from the young man today. He was driving to school, a squad car back behind him, and he went into shock. Pulled in the parking lot and parked. He was afraid to get out of his car. The squad car passed, circled, came back. The officer got out, came to his window, asked him, you got a problem? The young man had difficulty controlling his body functions. He's got PTSD from his experience. He had never violated any law. And it took the cooperation of the lying cop who said, even though he said no, he nodded like he would accept. Remedial lie to cover up from the founding lie. He was abused by his attorney. He was abused by the prosecutor. He was abused by the court itself. There is a culture of mendacity that exists in law enforcement. Cops lie. Narcotics cops lie most of the time. Vice cops lie in every case. They are assisted in doing so by prosecutors who get paid county taxpayer dollars to suborn perjury in criminal case after criminal case every day in the criminal courts building for Harris County at 1201 Franklin Street. Every day. And defense lawyers frequently go along with this culture of mendacity because ultimately there is more money for them. And someone has finally called in. Hello, you're on the air. Hello? Well, they didn't last on the air long. Try that again if you want in. 713-222-0715. Officer, you can call back because the next one, here we go. Hello, you're on the air.
This is your good and decent Pastor George.
Are you listening to the show, or is this a cold?
No, I'm listening to the show. I just walked out to my car to get my phone to call in. And you're doing a program on law enforcement and stopping the memorial and all that stuff. And now you got into this other. Are we talking about law enforcement in general and just stopping people? And
no, we're talking about the culture of mendacity that happens around not only law enforcement, but the courthouse. Because there's one judge that was in Jim Skelton's group today that got really angry with me because I stopped just short of fingering his cooperation with lying cops and prosecutors. And I told those lawyers, I said, some of you have diversified practices. You also practice civil law in addition to criminal law. Have you ever thought about when you have the clients of your opponents who have worked for the prosecutor's office in deposition, asking if they're aware that their lawyers suborned perjury as prosecutors?
Yeah. So, well, okay. I missed the thing today. I'm sorry. If I'd known you're going to be there, I would have been there, and I would have challenged you and Skelton both. But mendacity, you got something against mendacity. Mendacity is often the means to get at the truth of things, to get at what the values.
Well, that's Walter. That's a belief system that you have that we rest of us do not share.
All right.
We don't think you can get to the truth by lying.
All right. Well, you know the people do it all the time for every reason.
How does our court system work?
Well,
if it is based on perjured testimony in every criminal case.
I know that, Ray. There's a lot of perjury going on. It's the most committed crime around. I'm telling you. Yeah, but
well,
look,
when the judge, in the first place, I mean, you've been a criminal defense lawyer.
Yeah.
You're a criminal defense lawyer, and you have an audio tape that proves beyond a reasonable doubt the innocence of your client. All right? How do you help your client by destroying that tape?
Well, are you talking about how do you
help your client by destroying that tape?
That proves your client innocent?
Right.
Well, I don't think you do. But,
well, that's what she did. She destroyed that tape.
All right, I missed a few minutes.
Now the court has sealed the tape in the state's record.
Sealed the tape.
Who does that benefit? It covers up for the court's cooperation in the perjury of the officer.
All right.
It covers up for the prosecutor suborning perjury in the case and the charge. And so I think that we need to have someone go to the judicial standards thing and deal with the judge, and we need to go into the professional ethics thing and deal with the prosecutor, because that whole case was based on the perjury of a police officer that the prosecutor was aware of, that the defense lawyer was aware of, and ultimately the judge was aware of, and they're covering up the evidence of that perjury. Does that not make them accessories after the fact?
Well, I would think so, but good people don't lie for bad ends. They lie for good ends, and to get something accomplished, they cut through all of stuff, and it depends on what you're lying for. No, that's not a good lie. That's not a good cover-up. That's not the right thing to do. But people cover up their misdoings because they want to preserve the institution of police culture, Catholic culture, whatever. I mean, judicial culture. People do that, and I don't think it's right. I'm for transparency. Walter, I'm for rooting out corruption. But Ray, I've seen so damn much corruption around. I'm telling you,
Walter,
I get inured to it.
One of the great blessings of my life is that I am not a lawyer, so I can never be considered to be an officer of the court. Because I think being an officer of the court means you are constrained from exposing some really bad things that happen to really good and innocent people because of the structure of our criminal justice system.
No, you're not constrained because you're an officer of the court. You constrain yourself when you're too worried about your own personal advancement and your communion, your acceptance by your peers and by the judges. That's what constrains you. Lawyers ought to break loose and expose corruption. They ought to expose what's going on, but they don't do it because it's not in their self-interest to do it. But that's different from saying just you're an officer of the court. As an officer of the court, you really are obliged to tell it, to expose, to be a whistleblower. But listen, I'm not a whistleblower. I know a lot of times, sometimes I don't do it because judges having sex in the office with their court reporters. You think I'm going to tell anybody that? That's just something we cover up. There's stuff like that we do. We just have a camaraderie. We don't report on each other. But I'll tell you, I've seen corruption. Judges take these, they give these court appointments out. They have in the past. They still do it. You have to contribute so much to their campaigns. I say it all the time. I expose that, but what am I going to do? I mean, and sometimes in family courts, they've just been, they go so far as to show preferences to the clients, not just to the lawyers. It's just everything's corrupt, but it's a matter of degree, Ray. We're not as corrupt as some other countries, and I just praise the Lord for that. But
Walter,
that's just the way it is.
I appreciate your calling in, and I'm going to wrap up the show because we're running out of time.
Well, I wanted to just mention the damn stop and frisk thing in New York that liberal federal judges apparently set aside, and that law, and Blumberg's all upset about that, but that's the big issue of the day. That was just done yesterday. But I'm for stop and frisk. Just stop people and get these guns off and keep this crime. I'm for security.
Okay, would
I'm
you
for
read
security over privacy.
Walter, when you get a lot of spare time between your copious caseload, would you please sit down and read the Constitution Bill of Rights again? It's pretty structural. It needs to be broader based than that, but read them again. Thank you for calling, Walter.
Okay.
And so I beg for calls, and I get a call from my old friend Walter Boyd, and appreciate him listening to the show. I appreciate your listening to the show. We're down to the last 10 minutes of the show. And I've saved one little story for the very end. So I get this call, another call, right in the middle of all the news brouhaha about the stuff, the sting, and me and John Silva are quarreling in the news media. Channel 13 At John Silva's insistence, published the mugshots of all of the people arrested at the 7 arrest spot in the park. They didn't publish any of the mugshots of the people arrested where 15 people were arrested, but just where 7 were arrested. One of them was an employee of the Harris County Jail as a jailer. And initially they published their addresses, their home addresses, and their occupations and where they worked. Not just the Harris County guy, but after a little conversation by proxy with the news director, the addresses and the employment information on the others came down. We haven't seen anything like that in Houston since 1957. We know that the Vice Squad, the city of Houston, which take advantage of a vendor who teaches them how to lie under oath, want to destroy the lives of the people, even those they falsely arrest. But we usually don't have cooperation from the media to do that. By the way, when Channel 13 ran that, Fox News turned that information down, didn't run it. Channel 11 didn't run it. Channel 2 didn't run it. Houston Chronicle didn't print it. Only Channel 13. My mama told me never pick a fight with anybody that buys ink by the barrel or videotape by the pallet load. So I don't guess there's anything I'm going to do about that. But it destroys the life of people who were charged under police lies. A young voice calls me at home. He doesn't have any stress in his voice. I know about stress in voice. I did the prison job for 32 years. And he starts off by calling me Raymond. Only cops call me Raymond because that's what my criminal record is in. He says, Raymond, I want you to give me the same legal advice you're giving the other people who were arrested in Morrill Park. I need to have that legal advice. Will you give it to me? And I said, son, one of the great blessings of my life is that I'm not a lawyer. I can't give legal advice. I don't give legal advice. If you've been arrested, you need to get a lawyer and listen to the advice you get from that lawyer, but I'm not a lawyer. And he said, oh yeah, we know that we know that you're giving legal advice to those other people. I want you to give it to me. And I said, no, I don't give legal advice. I'm not qualified to give legal advice. I cannot believe that Houston Police Department would try to sting me like they did those other people. I'm Ray Hill. You think I'm gullible enough to answer my telephone and give advice which would be illegal for me to give to an unknown voice at the other end so they could charge me for practicing law without a license? Do you understand? That is the normal operating temperature of Houston Police Department. I like Chief McClellan. Hell, I like John Silva. But they will lie to cover up for their cops who lie under oath and in sworn statements. It is a culture of mendacity. And I don't care what Walter thinks about that. This country cannot long endure if the most basic principle of telling the truth under oath is undermined. My name is Ray Hill. You've been listening to Ray on the radio, unless you're watching it on television, in which case it's not the day that I do this, but at a later date. And we've been talking about a culture of mendacity in law enforcement and in prosecution and even in the judiciary in cases in Harris County, Texas. But this is true of any jurisdiction in the country. There's a cottage industry that makes money teaching police officers how to lie and teaching prosecutors how to foster that perjury, suborn that perjury in cases to get convictions. And if you think you're immune for that, I got news for you. You were subject, like so many others, for false arrest, false accusation and false convictions. We get them every day. That's what the Innocence Project has been getting fat doing, is proving that people on death row or serving long prison sentences have been falsely accused under falsely acquired evidence or fabricated evidence, withholding exculpatory information that would indicate or prove innocence. And it happens from the lowest of the misdemeanor to the highest of the felony. And some human lives are lost to execution until we get the traffic tickets right, until we get the vice sting operations right. What the hell are we doing talking about major denial of people their liberty? You know, in a Houston case one time dealing with how long people can stay in Harris County Jail, I've forgotten the site, but I know the opinion was written by late Justice William O. Douglas. He's talking about how long people can be held in Houston City Jail. And he said, in pertinent part, excuse the sexism, but it was a different era, a man's liberty is worth more than his money, no matter how much or how little of either we are talking about. Thank you for those words, Justice William O. Douglas. I hope the desire for liberty burns hot in your soul. I hope your willingness to show the courage to stand up to injustice, whether it happened to you or happened to another, is such that you cannot sit comfortably until you have addressed it. In AA, we have a prayer. Grant me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change, and the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to sort it out. There's a lot of stuff that me and you every day put in the serenity column because we don't have enough courage to move it to the courage column. There's a great deal we can do to change the world around us. May we find the courage to do that, and may we find the wisdom to figure out what things we can have an impact on. What have you done today to help the young people around you understand that they have rights that are worth fighting for? What have you done today to recall those people from whom liberty has been snatched unreasonably? The young man in the middle story, the young man from HCC, has just gone through a post-stress syndrome experience. He's in panic because he was followed by that police officer, scared. He made it through that without getting arrested. But he has fears. He dances with demons of fear that you don't know unless you've seen combat or unless you've been imprisoned falsely as he is. It'll be a long time before his soul is comforted because of the damage done to it by a lying cop, by a lying prosecutor, by a defense lawyer that devalued him and his liberty, and by a court who helps cover up those lies. My name is Ray Hill, and I will be in here 1 week hence on Wednesday at 2 p.m. next. Keep this spot on your dial, and thank you for listening to HMSnetradio.org.